Hello. It is March 26th, 2026. Here is your geopolitics thought of the day. Today, I'm thinking about definitions. This might be a painfully undergrad thing to say, but I really like it when people define their terms. And one thing that has begun to worry me more and more lately is that we are allowing concepts that are very poorly defined to define international political affairs. The concept that I'm thinking about the most in this context is multipolarity. Multipolarity is the hot buzzword of the day. Lots of people want to talk about multipolarity. People want to be aware of the multipolar world. It's become a catch all concept for the period of, I would say, extended and multifaceted crisis that we're living in. In general, multipolarity is used to mean a reduction in American influence, prestige, and economic and political power, or at least a relative reduction in those things, a relative to the rest of the world, typically China. What bothers me about this theory, though, is that it seems to be very poorly defined. Um, the origin point of the theory seems to have been Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, longtime bad guy. This was back in the 1990s. Lavrov is talking about the future, the post Soviet world, and he writes, along with some representatives from the People's Republic of China, this piece about the dawning of a multipolar world. And in the piece, he says that in the letter, I believe it's a letter to the United Nations, he says we're coming into a new era. We're coming into a multipolar era, as opposed to a bipolar era of the Cold War. And now we talk about multipolarity, and we say that multipolarity is a development from the unipolar era of the 1990s and the 2000s. And it's just strange to me that the same people who were saying that multipolarity is now in the 1990s and the 2000s are saying that now 20 years later multipolarity is now, and that period which they were saying at the time was multipolarity is actually this other thing, unipolarity, United States dominating everything. I also think there's a number of technical questions that I have. Is the United States really declining in power? It certainly seems to be declining in prestige. Um, is it declining in power relative to some other countries? To China, for example, specifically? Yeah, that seems to be the case. But the U.S. still maintains a pretty commanding lead. And there's a lot of reasons to suspect that the Chinese economy may be running out of steam, maybe, uh, maybe not a crisis situation, but China's no longer going to continue to advance by leaps and bounds the way it has for the past 20 years. So it's strange to me on that line that the period of unipolarity is a period in which the United States is the gap between the United States and its uh, uh, rivals or competitors is actually shrinking faster than it is during the period of multipolarity, right? They're catching up in the period of unipolarity, and then they haven't quite caught up in the period of multipolarity. Um, in terms of military power, certainly the United States is acting more unilaterally now in the period of multipolarity. The U.S. Is acting to on its own. It's respecting other countries less, and this seems to me to be contrary to what the people, specifically Lavrov and the Chinese, have been saying about multipolarity. That it's this period in which the sort of universal respect for sovereignty creates a more peaceful world. It seems like actually that's not the case, and it's interesting that during the period of unipolarity, the United States was driven by diplomatic and political necessity to seek out and create alliances that it had to respect. The United States, in the period of unipolarity, was much more respectful of other countries than it is during the period of multipolarity. And that's not necessarily a contraindication, but it at least makes me think that maybe this sort of idea that the period of multipolarity is a sort of a related to shifting U.S. power. It's hard for me to find very strong indicators of that trend. And again, looking forward 10 years from now, are we going to be having the same conversations? It's quite possible that we will. It's quite possible that I'm wrong. It's quite possible that the United States is in a terminal decline, in this imperial decline. But I feel like this is a narrative that at this point is a little bit fanciful. It's a little bit hopeful, and I worry that by predicting a period of unipolarity and by preparing or multipolarity, by creating this sort of this diffuse doctrine of division across all states, we're laying the groundwork diplomatically for a disintegration of interstate cooperation. We're laying the ideological groundwork for that, even if the actual groundwork, even if the actual ties that bind states together are strong. I don't know. Say what you think in the comments below. I may read them and respond to them in the future. That was your geopolitics thought of the day for March 26th, 2026.